One WWE superstar turned from hero to villain and back again over 30 times during his career, making his alignment changes a literal meme among wrestling fans. But here's the crazy part. That's just the beginning of how confusing WWE's moral compass really gets. We've got cheaters who became beloved heroes, villains so cool that crowds cheered them anyway, and monsters who redeemed themselves so well that fans forgot they were ever bad guys. Today we're breaking down every single level of WWE Anti-Hero. Let's start at the bottom with wrestling's most confused characters who couldn't figure out which side they were supposed to be on. Level 1. The Confused Tweener. Wrestling sites have estimated that through 2018, Big Show made approximately 34 turns since his WCW debut in 1995, with 4 of those alone coming during his first year with the WWF. That's not wrestling storytelling, that's just confusion with a giant-sized serving of inconsistency. These wrestlers represent the bottom tier of anti-heroes because they never figured out who they were supposed to be in the first place. When your character changes more often than people change their socks, you've got a problem. What happened was that fans stopped caring about their alignment because even the wrestlers seemed confused about whether they were good or bad. Big Show became the walking definition of character whiplash. He'd be crying about his father's death one week, then turning on his best friend the next. The man changed sides so frequently that WWE could have installed a revolving door just for his character motivations. His turns became so predictable that fans started making jokes about when the next one would happen, instead of being surprised by the actual turn. Let's take a look at Big Show's ridiculous track record during his early WWF years. He started as a monster heel in 1999, turned face by helping Mankind in March 1999, turned heel again by teaming with The Undertaker in August 1999, turned face once more during his feud with the Big Boss Man in late 1999, and then turned heel in early 2000 by producing a videotape against The Rock. That's just the first few years. By 2010, wrestling fans had given up trying to track whether Big Show was supposed to be good or bad on any given week. He changed sides more than a rotisserie chicken and became a walking meme in the process. Moving on to Rusev, who went from unstoppable monster heel to dancing with Lana to confused patriot in the span of just a few years. What started as a dominant foreign threat character turned into booking confusion that created accidental comedy. Rusev would crush John Cena one month, then be doing comedy segments about fish tanks the next. His character went from Bulgarian brute who hates America to guy who just wants to celebrate his wedding on TV to Rusev Day celebrant, without any logical connection between these personas. The booking confusion made his character into a punchline instead of a threat. Dolph Ziggler spent his entire career struggling with inconsistent character direction. His biggest trait became complaining about his position rather than developing any actual personality. Ziggler would cut promos about how underrated he was while simultaneously being booked as a loser who couldn't win the big matches. He'd get hot with crowds, turn heel for no reason, then turn face again when the heel turn didn't work. His character became defined by meta-commentary about his booking, rather than any genuine character development. So, as you can see, these wrestlers failed as anti-heroes because anti-heroes need conviction, even if that conviction is morally gray. Stone Cold Steve Austin had clear motivations. He hated authority and wanted to drink beer and kick ass. The Undertaker had supernatural justice as his driving force. These confused tweeners had nothing except whatever the writing team decided that week. Their inconsistency made them forgettable rather than complex, missing the mark entirely on what makes an anti-hero compelling. Confused tweeners teach us what not to do in wrestling storytelling. Switching sides without purpose just creates character soup that nobody wants to eat. Fans connect with wrestlers who have clear motivations, even when those motivations lead them to do questionable things. When wrestlers change their entire personality every few months, audiences lose the emotional investment that makes wrestling entertaining. The constant flip-flopping destroys any chance of creating the moral complexity that defines great anti-heroes. But what happens when wrestlers embrace their rule-breaking nature and make it part of their charm? That's where things get interesting. Level 2. The Lovable Rogues. The cheaters fans love, anyway. Eddie Guerrero's motto, "I lie, I cheat, I steal," should have made him the most hated man in wrestling, but instead made him one of the most beloved wrestlers of all time. That's the weird magic of Lovable Rogues. They break every rule in the book, but somehow become heroes because they do it with such charm and charisma that fans can't help but root for them anyway. What happened was that traditional wrestling logic says cheaters should be booed out of the building, but these guys got standing ovations for their dishonesty. Fans would literally cheer when Eddie pulled out a steel chair or used the ropes for leverage during his matches. The crowd knew exactly what he was doing, and they loved every second of it. This created a strange situation where rule breaking became entertainment instead of heel behavior. Let's take a a look at Eddie Guerrero's masterful to cheat in creative ways while keeping his lovable underdog persona intact. He would hide weapons, distract referees, and use every dirty trick possible, but he did it with such style that it felt like survival rather than villainy. When Eddie cheated to beat a bigger opponent, fans saw it as the little guy using his brain to overcome physical disadvantages. His cheating felt necessary instead of evil, which made all the difference in how crowds reacted to his tactics. Moving on to Santino Marella, whose bumbling attempts at rule-breaking were so endearing that fans cheered his failures as much as his successes. Santino's version of cheating was completely different from Eddie's smooth operations. His attempts were clumsy and often backfired in hilarious ways. The Cobra finishing move was technically cheating since he hid the sock puppet, but it was so ridiculous that nobody cared. Fans loved watching Santino try to be sneaky because his efforts were more entertaining than threatening. As a result, R-Truth's conspiracy theories and silly antics made his rule-bending feel more like comedy than corruption. Truth would come up with wild explanations for his behavior that made no logical sense but were hilarious to watch. His paranoid character would justify breaking rules by claiming everyone was out to get him, which turned his cheating into comedy segments rather than serious heel tactics. The audience bought into his conspiracy theories because they were fun, not because they made sense. So as you can see, these wrestlers succeeded as anti-heroes because their cheating came from a place of heart rather than pure malice. Eddie wanted to provide for his family and prove himself as a performer. Santino just wanted to entertain people and make them laugh. Truth's rule-breaking came from his confused but lovable character, rather than mean-spirited intentions. Their methods were wrong, but their intentions felt right, creating the perfect moral gray area that fans could accept. It's fair to say that lovable rogues work because fans forgive rule-breaking when it's paired with genuine likability and relatable struggles. People connected with Eddie's underdog story and his family man persona. They enjoyed Santino's comedy and appreciated his effort to entertain them. Truth's conspiracy theories were endearing because they came from a character who seemed genuinely confused rather than evil. These wrestlers made cheating feel human instead of villainous. What made these anti-heroes special was their ability to make fans overlook moral problems because of their personal charm. They proved that how you cheat matters just as much as whether you cheat. When rule-breaking comes with personality and heart, audiences will forgive almost anything. But sometimes wrestlers don't need to justify their behavior at all. They just need to be so naturally charismatic that fans stop caring about right and wrong entirely. Level 3, the Villains 2 Popular Taboo. The Rock, during his corporate champion era, was supposed to be the most hated man in wrestling, but his charisma was so off the charts that fans couldn't help but cheer for him anyway. WWE had created the perfect villain on paper, an arrogant corporate champion who looked down on the audience and represented everything fans hated about corporate control. The problem was that The Rock was simply too entertaining to boo properly, no matter how hard the company tried to make him despicable. What happened was that WWE faced a booking nightmare when their carefully crafted villains became too entertaining and cool for audiences to boo. The company spent months building The Rock as the ultimate corporate bad guy, complete with expensive suits and condescending promos about how much better he was than everyone else. But every time he grabbed the microphone, his natural charisma and incredible speaking ability made fans forget they were supposed to hate him. His presence was magnetic and his delivery was so smooth that crowds found themselves enjoying his insults instead of getting angry about them. Let's take a look at The Rock's corporate heel run, where his trash talk was so clever that crowds started cheering his insults instead of booing them. He would call fans troglodytes and tell entire cities that they sucked. But he did it with such wit and style that people were impressed rather than offended. The Rock's ability to craft creative insults and deliver them with perfect timing turned what should have been heat-generating moments into entertainment segments that fans loved. His catchphrases during this period became crowd favorites instead of reasons to hate him. Moving on to Randy Orton's legend killer gimmick, his cocky attitude and smooth in-ring work made fans appreciate his villainy as an art form rather than something to despise. Orton would disrespect wrestling legends and act like he was better than everyone who came before him, which should have made him the most hated wrestler on the roster. Instead, his confidence came across as cool rather than arrogant. His in-ring skills were so impressive that fans started respecting his ability to back up his talk with actual performance. The way he carried himself and executed his moves made his heel work feel more like a masterclass in wrestling psychology than genuine bad guy behavior. As a result, Batista's heel runs showed how his intensity and star power made it impossible for fans to see him as anything but a main event player worthy of respect. When Batista turned heel, He brought the same physical presence and commanding personality that made him a successful face. His heel tactics felt more like the actions of a serious competitor than a despicable villain. Fans recognized his legitimate toughness and star quality, which made it hard for them to boo someone who clearly belonged at the top of the card. So, as you can see, these wrestlers accidentally became anti-heroes because WWE couldn't dim their natural charisma enough to keep them as pure villains. The company tried everything to maintain their heel status, including cheap heat tactics like insulting local sports teams and desperate booking decisions that forced them into increasingly ridiculous situations. But charisma trumps booking every time. When someone is genuinely entertaining, audiences will cheer regardless of what the script says they should do. Cool heels prove that fan reactions are more powerful than creative intentions. These wrestlers showed that being too good at your job can actually work against the character you're supposed to be playing. Their natural star power and entertainment value made them impossible to hate, forcing WWE to eventually embrace their popularity rather than fight against it. But what happens when heroes embrace the darkness themselves, using villainous methods while still claiming to fight for justice? Level 4. The Justified Vigilantes. Heroes who fight dirty. The Undertaker spent decades attacking people from behind, using weapons and breaking rules, but was always considered one of WWE's greatest heroes. That contradiction shows how these wrestlers mastered the art of using villainous tactics for heroic purposes, creating a moral gray area that fans embraced completely. The question becomes whether the ends justify the means when good guys use bad guy methods to achieve their goals. What happened was that The Undertaker's supernatural justice system made tombstoning someone through a table acceptable because he was usually punishing someone who deserved it. His dark persona allowed him to do things that would get other wrestlers booed out of the building. When The Undertaker attacked opponents from behind or used steel chairs and caskets as weapons, fans cheered because they understood the context. His targets were typically bigger villains who had crossed moral lines themselves, making his brutal retaliation feel like cosmic justice rather than cheap heel tactics. Let's take a look at how The Undertaker's career was built on actions that should have made him a villain but somehow made him more heroic. He would drag opponents to ringside and tombstone them through announce tables, which is exactly the kind of rule-breaking that heel wrestlers use to get heat. But The Undertaker's supernatural character gave these actions a different meaning. Fans saw his violence as otherworldly punishment for people who had committed wrestling sins. His willingness to cross moral boundaries felt like divine retribution rather than cheap tactics. Moving on to Kane's explosive entrance into WWE, his destructive methods were framed as protecting his brother and seeking righteous vengeance. Kane's debut involved ripping the door off Hell in a Cell and tombstoning The Undertaker, which should have made him an instant villain. Instead, the storyline revealed that Kane was seeking justice for childhood trauma, turning his destructive behavior into something fans could understand and support. His fiery persona and brutal in-ring style became symbols of righteous anger rather than evil destruction. As a result, Kane's moral ambiguity resonated with audiences who understood that his actions, though often brutal, were for a perceived greater good. When Kane used his explosive pyrotechnics or performed devastating moves like the Tombstone Piledriver, fans accepted these tactics because they served his quest for family justice. His rule-breaking felt necessary rather than villainous, which allowed audiences to cheer for someone whose methods were clearly questionable. So, as you can see, Seth Rollins' 2019 face run provides a modern example where his ruthless tactics against Baron Corbin and other authority figures made his rule-breaking feel like necessary rebellion. Rollins would attack authority figures from behind, use weapons, and break rules just like classic heel wrestlers, but fans cheered because his targets represented corporate control that audiences wanted to see defeated. His aggressive methods against the establishment allowed fans to enjoy the violence because it served a greater narrative purpose. It's fair to say that these anti-heroes worked because their dark methods served a greater good that fans could rally behind. Audiences accepted their moral ambiguity because their targets were usually bigger villains who needed to be stopped by any means necessary. The Undertaker punished rule breakers, Kane sought family justice, and Rollins fought corporate oppression. Their willingness to fight fire with fire made them relatable heroes rather than perfect role models. What made Justified Vigilantes succeed as anti-heroes was how they gave fans permission to enjoy violence and rule-breaking when it served justice. People could cheer for brutal tactics without feeling guilty because the narrative context justified the actions. These wrestlers proved that audiences prefer complex characters who are willing to get their hands dirty over pure heroes who always follow the rules. But some anti-heroes took their rebellion even further, targeting the very system that employed them. Level 5. The Rebellious Icons. Stone Cold. Steve Austin turned disrespecting the boss into the ultimate heroic trait in wrestling, making corporate rebellion the most reliable way to get over with crowds. What happened was that WWE discovered fans would cheer loudest for wrestlers who said and did exactly what every working person wanted to do to their own bosses but couldn't because of real-world consequences. This tapped into every fan's fantasy of telling their boss exactly what they think without getting fired, making authority-defying wrestlers instant crowd favorites. The challenge was that their rebellions had to feel genuine rather than scripted to maintain their anti-hero credibility with smart fans. Wrestling audiences became increasingly aware of corporate storylines during the late 1990s and early 2000s, which meant rebels needed to feel like real people with real frustrations instead of characters following predetermined scripts. When rebellion felt too polished or corporate approved, fans would reject it as fake, but when it felt authentic, crowds would explode with support. Let's take a look at Shawn Michaels' DX era, where his disrespectful attitude toward authority figures felt like authentic rebellion rather than corporate-approved storylines. Michaels and D-Generation X would mock WWE officials, make inappropriate jokes about management, and generally act like employees who had stopped caring about workplace professionalism. Their antics included everything from crude humor about executives to openly defying direct orders from authority figures. The group's rebellious attitude felt real because Michaels brought his own personality and frustrations into the character, making their anti-establishment behavior seem genuine rather than scripted. Moving on to CM Punk's pipe bomb promo, his authority-defying character blurred the lines between scripted rebellion and real frustration with WWE's corporate structure. Punk's famous rant included genuine criticisms of WWE's creative direction, treatment of talent, and business practices that many fans and wrestlers had been thinking but couldn't say publicly. His complaints about the company felt authentic because they reflected real behind-the-scenes issues that wrestling fans had heard rumors about for years. This created a situation where fans weren't sure how much was storyline and how much was Punk expressing genuine workplace frustration. As a result, Daniel Bryan's organic rise against the authority showed how fan support could directly influence WWE's booking plans when rebellion felt authentic enough. Bryan's underdog persona and rejection of corporate control resonated so strongly with audiences that WWE had to abandon their original storyline plans and embrace his rebellion instead. The company had intended to push other wrestlers as main event stars, but fan reactions to Bryan's anti-authority character were so overwhelming that they were forced to change course and give him the spotlight. So as you can see, these anti-heroes succeeded because their anti-establishment attitudes reflected genuine audience frustration with corporate control and wrestling storylines. Fans were tired of corporate-approved heroes and obvious storyline manipulation, so they gravitated toward wrestlers who seemed to be fighting against the same system that was creating boring entertainment. Their rebellions resonated because they felt like real people fighting real systems, rather than characters following scripts written by the same corporate structure they were supposedly rebelling against. It's fair to say that rebellious icons work as anti-heroes because they channel universal workplace frustrations into wrestling entertainment. Every person who has ever had a bad boss or felt controlled by corporate bureaucracy could relate to these wrestlers' anti-authority attitudes. Their success proved that audiences prefer complex characters who challenge systems rather than heroes who simply follow rules and respect authority figures. But rebellion wasn't the only path to anti-hero greatness. Sometimes the most compelling heroes were the ones who had walked the darkest roads first. Level 6. The Redeemed Monsters. Former villains turned heroes. Some of wrestling's most beloved heroes were once its most despised villains, proving that redemption arcs create the most powerful anti-heroes in the business. What happened was that years of masterful heel work can make an eventual face turn feel more meaningful and earned than characters who started as heroes from day one. These wrestlers had to overcome their own dark history, which made their heroic moments feel like genuine character growth rather than simple booking decisions. The challenge becomes making fans forget or forgive years of villainous behavior while maintaining the edge that made them compelling in the first place. Wrestling audiences have long memories when it comes to heel tactics, so redeemed monsters need to prove their transformation is real without losing the intensity that made them stars as villains. This creates a delicate balance where wrestlers must show genuine change while keeping the qualities that made them interesting to watch. Let's take a look at Batista's evolution from Evolution's muscle to beloved face, where his heel work gave weight and credibility to his later heroic moments. Batista spent years as the enforcer for Triple H, Ric Flair, and Randy Orton, using brute force and intimidation tactics that made him one of the most hated wrestlers on the roster. His role as Evolution's muscle established him as a dominant villain who would do anything to help his group maintain power. When cracks started showing in his allegiance to Triple H in 2005, fans began responding positively to his moments of defiance against his former mentor. Moving on to the culmination at WrestleMania 21, where Batista defeated Triple H for the World Heavyweight Championship after months of tension and betrayal. This victory felt earned because audiences had watched him slowly break free from corporate control and stand up for himself. His transformation from loyal enforcer to independent hero resonated with fans who had seen his character development unfold over time. The match represented more than just a title change. It was proof that even corporate muscle could find their own path. As a result, Triple H's transformation from despised authority figure to respected veteran shows how corporate villain years made fans appreciate his later contributions. Triple H spent the Attitude Era and Ruthless Aggression Era as a manipulative authority figure aligned with the McMahon family, earning massive heat for his corporate greed and backstage politics. His gradual transition involved showing respect for other wrestlers and taking more heroic roles in specific storylines. His feuds with The Undertaker and D-Generation X reunions allowed him to tap into nostalgia and gain audience support by showing different sides of his personality. So as you can see, Roman Reigns' journey from rejected face to tribal chief to current beloved status demonstrates how embracing the heel role fixed his character problems completely. Reigns initially faced audience resistance when pushed as a top babyface, because fans felt his booking was forced and lacked genuine connection. His 2020 heel turn, where he aligned with Paul Heyman and adopted the tribal chief persona, was the turning point his career needed. This new character allowed him to embrace his natural charisma and play a more complex, morally ambiguous role that showcased his acting abilities. It's fair to say that these wrestlers became perfect anti-heroes because their dark pasts added depth and complexity to their heroic personas. Fans developed deeper emotional connections to characters whose redemption felt earned through genuine character growth and compelling storytelling rather than simple script changes. Redeemed monsters work because they prove people can change while keeping the edge and intensity that made them compelling villains in the first place. But what happens when someone takes all these anti-hero qualities and combines them into one perfect package? That's where wrestling found its ultimate culture-defining rebel. Level 7, the culture-defining rebel. Steve Austin did everything wrong according to traditional hero standards, cursed at everyone, attacked his boss regularly, showed no respect for authority, and became the most popular wrestler in history. That stunning fact shows how Austin single-handedly redefined what it meant to be a wrestling hero during the Attitude Era, an era whose massive success was built largely around his rebellious character. He became the perfect anti-hero blueprint that every rebellious character since has tried to copy but never quite match. What happened was that Austin's character shouldn't have worked according to traditional wrestling logic, but instead became a cultural phenomenon that changed entertainment forever. Wrestling heroes were supposed to be role models who respected authority, followed rules, and set good examples for children. Austin threw all of that out the window and became something completely different. His success proved that audiences were ready for complex characters who reflected real-world frustrations rather than corporate-approved messaging. Let's take a look at Austin's beer-drinking, authority-defying persona that connected with audiences tired of cookie-cutter good guys and obvious corporate storylines. His Texas rattlesnake character drank beer in the ring, used profanity freely, and treated wrestling like a bar fight instead of athletic competition. Austin represented every working person who had ever wanted to tell their boss exactly what they thought without facing consequences. His rebellious attitude felt authentic because it came from a place of genuine frustration rather than scripted rebellion. Moving on to his legendary feuds with Mr. McMahon, these storylines turned workplace rebellion into must-see television and cultural commentary. Austin versus McMahon became the central conflict that defined the Attitude Era because it tapped into universal workplace dynamics. Every fan could relate to having a boss they couldn't stand, which made Austin's attacks on McMahon feel like vicarious revenge. Their feud worked because it represented real power struggles between employees and management that people experienced in their daily lives. As a result, specific moments like the beer truck incident became defining images of anti-hero perfection that wrestling fans fans still reference today. When Austin drove a beer truck to the ring and hosed down the corporation with beer, it wasn't just a wrestling angle, it was a cultural moment that captured the spirit of rebellion. His countless stunners delivered to McMahon became appointment television because fans knew they were watching something that broke traditional wrestling rules about heroes and villains. So as you can see, Austin succeeded because he felt like a real person with real frustrations rather than a scripted character following corporate guidelines. His authentic Texas personality made every rebellion feel genuine, and every stunner feel like justified payback against authority figures who deserved punishment. Austin never pretended to be perfect or tried to set a good example. He was unapologetically himself, complete with all his flaws and anger issues. It's fair to say that Stone Cold proved anti-heroes work best when they're completely authentic, rather than trying to be perfect role models. His willingness to curse, drink beer, and attack his boss made him more relatable than traditional heroes who always did the right thing. Austin showed that audiences preferred characters who acted like real people instead of corporate-approved personalities designed by committee. What made Austin the ultimate anti-hero was his ability to transcend wrestling and become a pop culture phenomenon whose influence extended far beyond sports entertainment. His catchphrase, "And that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so," became part of mainstream culture, proving that his rebellious character resonated with people who had never watched wrestling. Austin's success changed wrestling permanently by proving that moral ambiguity and authentic personality could create deeper connections with fans than simple good versus evil storylines. But Austin's unpredictability was just the beginning of how far modern anti-heroes would push the boundaries of chaos and authenticity. Bonus level: the unpredictable lunatic. Dean Ambrose embraced chaos so completely that he fought heroes and villains with equal intensity, making him wrestling's ultimate wildcard anti-hero. What happened was that Ambrose became the contemporary embodiment of unpredictability who proved that modern anti-heroes thrive on uncertainty and rule-breaking rather than following traditional good guy or bad guy patterns. His character operated outside normal wrestling logic, which made him fascinating to watch because fans never knew what he would do next. The tension around his unhinged character made both allies and enemies nervous because nobody knew which side he'd choose in any given situation. Ambrose would attack wrestlers regardless of their alignment if they crossed him, creating genuine uncertainty about his motivations and loyalties. This unpredictability kept storylines fresh because other wrestlers had to constantly worry about whether Ambrose would help them or hurt them based on his mood, rather than traditional face-heel dynamics. Let's take a look at his WWE run as the Lunatic Friend, where he brought legitimate unpredictability to storylines through his chaotic wrestling style and intense promos. Ambrose's matches felt different from standard WWE presentations because he would use unconventional weapons, fight in unusual locations, and employ brawling tactics that made his contests feel like genuine fights rather than choreographed entertainment. His promos were equally chaotic, featuring rambling monologues and strange tangents that kept audiences guessing about his mental state and intentions. Moving on to his Shield breakup and subsequent solo career, his anti-hero status grew from his willingness to attack anyone who crossed him regardless of their traditional alignment. When Seth Rollins betrayed the Shield by attacking Ambrose and Roman Reigns, Ambrose's response wasn't just typical babyface anger. It was unhinged revenge that included dangerous stunts and extreme violence that went beyond normal wrestling boundaries. His feud with Rollins showed fans that Ambrose operated by his own moral code rather than standard hero behavior patterns. As a result, his transition to Jon Moxley in AEW amplified his unhinged wildcard reputation and provided him with greater creative freedom to express his chaotic character. Leaving WWE allowed Moxley to embrace more extreme elements of his personality without corporate restrictions on language, violence, or storyline direction. His AEW work featured high-intensity brawls and dangerous spots that demonstrated his commitment to his unhinged persona, particularly during his World Championship reigns, where he endured as much punishment as he inflicted. So, as you can see, Ambrose succeeded as an anti-hero because he never let audiences get comfortable with predicting his next move or understanding his motivations completely. His real-life career decisions mirrored his character's rebellious nature, making his anti-hero persona feel authentic rather than scripted corporate entertainment. When Moxley left WWE for AEW, prioritizing creative freedom over corporate security, it reflected the same desire for authenticity and control that defined his on-screen character. It's fair to say that unpredictable lunatics work as anti-heroes because they embody pure chaos in a world where fans crave authenticity over corporate polish and predictable storytelling. Wrestling's greatest anti-heroes are characters who defy conventional hero and villain tropes, resonating with audiences because of their complex motivations and morally ambiguous actions rather than simple good versus evil storytelling. What happened was that wrestlers like Stone Cold, The Rock, and CM Punk became cultural icons because their personalities connected with audiences in ways that corporate writers never expected or planned for. Like and subscribe for 1,000 years of luck.